Lee Camp, welcome to the show. Lee, I'm extremely sorry about what's happened. I know it's not the end for you, and we'll discuss where people can still watch you, but how did all this happen, and how did you feel when you got the news?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of shocking how quick it's been, how quickly it happened. In the span of 3 days, I lost my TV show. The videos on YouTube of Redacted Tonight are banned across the EU and Europe. And my personal podcast, Moment of Clarity, was deleted from Spotify. And of course, it wasn't just my show. RT America shut down in the span of a few hours. And it was shocking. I think that it had to be either sanctions that made it impossible to operate, or the U.S. Justice Department telling them to stop, or something very sudden. You know, it was not just we're getting some backlash kind of shutdown. It was something very sudden, and it's sad to see this level of censorship. You know, the Americans pride themselves on this freedom of speech, freedom of press, and it has become clear over the past few days just how aggressively that is not true.
Well, you've segued perfectly into what was my next question. You're supposed to be the land of the free. You're one of the only countries in the world where the First Amendment guarantees your right to free speech. What about all that?
Yeah, well, you know, you got to look into the fine print. The devil's in the details. We are the land of the free, and we also have the most prisoners in the world. We are the land of a prison state. So you can see how false that is. And if it's not just RT America, it is anti-war voices, anti-imperialist voices have been suppressed and crushed on most social media platforms. You know, my stuff has been shadow banned on Facebook for years now. And to me, it shows how much the U.S. corporate government, which they are basically owned by corporations, how much they can't handle any kind of truth that are outside a very tiny Overton window, a very tiny window of allowable thought, which is on your mainstream media.
Well, you've always been a candle in the dark, and now it's been snuffed out on the big platforms. But this is 2022. It's not 1952. It's not even 2002. People can still watch you to get your take on events and actually get a terrifically good laugh while doing it.
Yes, patreon.com/Lee Camp I've created. I'm still on YouTube. I still have LeeCamp.com.
You're on YouTube, but only in the U.S.
Well, yeah, that's true. Redacted Tonight is banned in other countries.
So redacted is redacted.
Exactly. I mean, what a way for a show to go out after 8 years is to actually have Redacted Tonight be redacted. I guess there's no way I'd prefer for it to happen, but it is sad to see it go. You know, I poured my heart and soul into that show. I had immense freedom. I wrote every word I ever said myself. I never was told what to say or how to say it or anything, and I doubt I'll ever see that from another network program again.
Never.
But like you said, I'm still out there on Patreon and on Twitter, so I will continue.
You'll have to go on the boards, although the way things are going, and we saw it in Canada recently, that if you protest or take a view that the state doesn't like, you could end up actually getting your bank account frozen. You could end up getting your pets taken in Canada. How long before they start to say you can't book a theatre?
Yeah, it's coming. I mean, I had said about you're referring to the trucker protest in Canada. You don't have to agree with what the truckers stand for, what they're saying. What happened is very dangerous. To just freeze the bank accounts of any kind of activist, nonviolent activist that's protesting something. What is to stop them from doing that against environmentalists, against pipeline protesters? It is just one step. And it will be happening. So I think people should be terrified with the way things are going. And cross-platform censorship, like I've seen in the past week, means there is a conspiracy afoot. They are conspiring. Like organization, I mean, companies have to get together and decide simultaneously that they're silencing these voices. It's very dangerous.
And what's been the reaction from other comedians, other people in show? I mean, Joe Rogan, that Spotify tried to, well, they tried to defend him. They resisted the siren calls from 1960s hippies to drive him off the air. In the end, Spotify backed down with him. Have you had any support from your peers?
I mean, there are some great examples of people that have supported me, like Abby Martin and Ben Norton and so many great journalists out there. But in terms of just regular comedians that are incredibly well known, no, not at all. I don't hear from them. I haven't heard from them in several years because apparently when you're anti-imperialist and anti-corporate America, you're a leper. And I have not gotten much support from those big name comics. Joe Rogan has been supportive in the past. I don't even know that I don't know that he's avoiding supporting me. But most of them have no interest in touching something like this.
Well, of course, Francis Bacon said that self-censorship was the arrow that flies in the night. People will self-censor themselves from supporting you in case they're next.
Yeah, I think that is a big factor at play here is they don't want to risk their political capital, their online clout, as it were, to stand up for someone who has, turned into a pariah of the state. And again, it's not just me. This is anybody who is at RT America. This is anybody who is strongly anti-war in this time where you're supposed to just, fall for the jingoist wave and just start frothing at the mouth to send more weapons. You really are, you're anathema to the public discourse when you're speaking out against war. This
recalls to me a great movie I saw called Trumbo, which talked of the McCarthyite period where people like you actually had to move to Europe. And when they stayed in the United States, they had to adopt false names. The script of Spartacus itself was written by a man who couldn't reveal himself because he'd been blacklisted and banned in the wave of McCarthyism in the 1950s. Is that what we're approaching now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. There really are. Having to, Trumbo had to be behind the scenes. And this didn't have to do with McCarthyism, but it had to do with the state chasing him. Was Lenny Bruce, famous comedian, was speaking out against the state, speaking out against religion, things that were not generally accepted on stage. And he was basically driven to his death by the FBI. I mean, they hounded him and arrested him at every chance they got, and he couldn't make a living. And then he ultimately OD'd. And we saw his life, or people saw his life crumble because of the attacks of the state. So just because you're a performer or an entertainer or a writer does not make you free of this level of harassment, this extensive harassment, if you aren't agreeing with the U.S. war machine.
An even greater man, Paul Robeson, of course, was effectively pushed out of public life, a man who'd been a giant on Broadway and on the West End stage, who'd been in Showboat, the screen superstar, a man who was the first black player to play professional football for Rutgers and so on. There's a long history of this kind of witch hunting.
Oh yeah, so many brilliant people have been in prison. Eugene Debs and Abby Hoffman was a great and hilarious political activist who was also kind of driven into hiding because of COINTELPRO, and his life was basically destroyed. It happens again and again. History seems cyclical, and if you look back, this is not new. When the U.S. needs rallying for war or rallying for their propaganda talking points, they will do everything they can to shut down the voices that speak out against it.
And all of this happening under the Democrats.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's the two corporate parties are the two sides of the same coin, and so it doesn't really matter whether it was under Trump, under Biden. Under Trump was when a lot of these harassment and a lot of these sanctions against RT America and the like started, and now we're seeing the continuation under Biden. So. Again, people like to think that these are two different worlds. You get a Republican or a Democrat in office, but they agree on 80 to 90% of the structural issues of the country. They're owned by the same companies, and there really is very little difference between those two parties. So
there we have it. If you're in the United States, follow Lee Camp on YouTube. If you're not in the United States, go to Patreon/Lee Camp. My dear, wear it as a badge of honor. Consider yourselves officially redacted. Thanks for coming on the show.